Okay, we're going to talk about disc dampers and why they're important for your car. So a disc damper is probably one of the very first upgrades you should get, and in terms of performance, it's very helpful to keep the rear end planted. So if you look at a box stock MRO3 chassis, usually come with a top shock, but not a damper for the most part, RWDs. So if you look at the rear motor pod, and you kind of like flip this around, you'll see it basically there's nothing to damp the springiness, especially left and right of the motor pod. So as you go around turns, you actually see the rear end chatter and bounce, and you can visibly see this on the car, especially like on a long sweeper. So the way to calm that down is to add a disc damper. Here's a very simple one. This is a Kyosho pod with a plastic damper. I think some of the Evos come with this. But as you notice now, as I move the rear pod around, it's not bouncing. The friction of the disc damper basically calms that down a lot. And let's go up to, this is a PN disc damper, and even smoother than that. This one has a little bit of silicone oil on it for lubrication and damping, and it's just very damped. There's no bouncing as the pod goes around. And here's a PN 2.5 car with a damper. So putting on disc damper really keeps your rear end planted as you go through turns, and prevents that chattering you'll see on a car without a disc damper. Okay, so here is a brand new disc damper. This is one of the PN, this is a black carbon disc damper, brand new. Probably one of the most popular ones. So we go ahead and open the bag, and we're going to start with looking at, let's put the plates away for now. Let's take a look at the discs. So go ahead and take the discs out of the bag. So the first thing that you need to do with the discs, I'm going to grab another car that has a post on here, and I've seen this on a lot of cars, is that the discs, especially these from PN, the hole for the post is too small to start right off the bat. So if you put this on the post, it's too small. It won't free float down. I can push hard and get it over, but you see that this is not moving. It's basically a very tight fit on the post. And so if you try to install your disc like this right out of the bag, they're going to be too tight and not going to be able to move up or down or pivot freely, which kind of, it's not going to work well. Disc damper is not going to be smooth. So the first thing we have to do is really open up these holes so that the disc can float freely on the post. And the easiest way to do this is to grab a reamer. So a body reamer works the best, something like this. And we're just going to ream out the hole. You could also use, in a pinch, an X-Acto knife if you're careful. Generally do not want to use a drill bit, but you're just going to go in here and slowly work the hole and ream it larger. So what you want to do is make the hole large enough that it slides freely on the post, but not too loose. So you don't want to make the hole too big, and so right now it's still too tight. So we're going to take off some more. And just go slowly here. Of course, you can always take off more, but if you take off too much, you can't add material back. So we're just going ahead and reaming this hole a little bit larger. And periodically keep checking it. So it's getting closer. It's getting a little bit bigger. So we'll take off another pass and just do this slowly. Okay, let's check it again. So it's looking good now. So as you can see, as I put the damper disc on the post, it basically drops by gravity. So that's what you want. You want it completely free and not hung up when you drop it on. And make it slightly bigger is okay, but you don't want to get too much bigger, because if you make it the hole too much bigger, then you'll have some lateral play, too much clearance around the post, and then it won't be damping, let's say, as effectively. Yeah, so this is about perfect. Get a little bit bigger, but just drop freely by gravity onto the post, and that should be good. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is how to get your discs and damper plate flat and smooth. So this is the brand new out of the bag damper disc. And you look at the bottom, you can see in the reflection there's some shallow depressions where there's some sink from the injection molding, a little bit of variation in the plastic from the molding. So you can kind of see that especially as you tilt this in the reflection of the light, you can kind of see these little imperfections. Similarly, if you take this is a brand new, fresh out of the bag damper plate, as I rotate this around in the light, you can see the edges, especially the inner edge of this hole, some of the outer edges are sharp. It's really due to the fabrication process, machining leftover, so there's a slight sharp corner on that surface, on the edge there. So if you were to go ahead and install this, you put these two together, they're kind of flat, but as you go across the edge of the corner, whether sharp or the disc is not perfectly flat, it will catch. And as you can imagine, as your car's motor pod is rotating, it'll stick in these certain places as the edge of the disc catches on the edge of the plate, or vice versa. So your motor pod damping action will not be smooth, which is going to affect how your car handles. So what we have to do is basically sand these two flat, basically both surfaces of the damper plate and both discs. And the way to do that is with wet sanding it. All right, so here we're going to do some wet sanding on the damper discs and the damper plate to get them smooth. So I've got here is a flat plate, it's a piece of acrylic, but any flat surface will work. Tabletop, counter, something really flat. I've got here a piece of 3000 grit wet dry sandpaper. I think 3000 works pretty well. Something between 2000 and 5000 is probably fine. I think 1000 maybe a little bit coarse. So we're going to go ahead and take the piece of sandpaper. We're going to add a little bit of water, so it's important that you add some water to it. The water is going to lubricate and make the finish smoother as you sand, compared to, say, like dry sanding. So we're going to have a bit of water on here. So we'll go ahead and take your disc. Take your brand new disc. All right, and you're going to put it on the sandpaper in the water, and basically, and this is where it's a little hard, make a bunch of circles. So push down, and this is kind of hard to grip, but you do this, I don't count the number of times, but basically a bunch of times. I would say, I don't know, 50, 100 circles, pushing down hard, going left, right. You do want to do circles instead of forward, back, or left, right. So you kind of get more even wear circularly across the disc face. So just keep doing that. So I want to show the whole thing, but after you do this, so I have a new disc and an old disc here, or sanded disc. So if you look at the disc on the right, this is what we start off with out of the bag, and you can kind of see all the reflections on there. It's not really sanded smooth, and see all the imperfections. Now this one here, which has been wet sanded, you can kind of see that it's very smooth. The imperfections are gone from the molding, and it's all a nice, flat, dull, even surface, which is what you want to get some even damping action. Once again, see that sanded one versus the out of the bag, not sanded one. Okay, So that's what you want to do to both your discs. Get them really smooth with wet sanding. Now you're going to do the same thing with the damper plate. So the damper plate in particular, where you want to concentrate on in addition to like the whole surface, is to get the inner edge of this hole where the disc definitely slides across, and kind of the outer edges as well if you can, to break the corners, because it's usually sharp there. But you can see there's a sharp in these, in the inner corner of that hole and on the edges. So once again, it's the same technique. Basically you put it on the sandpaper, wet, and try to do a bunch of circles left and right, etc., until it's smooth. I won't go ahead and do that, but here's one that is sanded for comparison. And so as you can see, all the edges, the sharp edges are gone. This is the unsanded one here. Are gone, and you've got a really nice kind of even finish across the surface. And so same on this side. So all the sharp edges are gone, and you've got a flat kind of duller surface all across the plate. And then when you feel, if you put your sanded disc on the sanded plate, this should basically feel like glass on glass. You should not feel any imperfections, any catching. It'll just be like floating glass on glass, which is the finish you want. Super smooth on super smooth. And this gets you basically the most consistent, smoothest damping action. Alright, so now that we've got our nice freshly sanded discs and freshly sanded damper plate, we're going to go ahead and install this on your car. So the first thing to do is to put on the damper post. This is going to depend a lot on what type of motor pod you're using, whether it's an aluminum one or the Kyosho stock one. You do have to get the height of the post correct. This particular mount, PN mount, you can slide it up and down. On other mounts, for instance this one, to get the post height correct, we need to shim the post up and down with washers. But your ultimate goal is really to get the post and the discs with the center in center, so there's equal space on top and bottom. So have the discs and plate be centered on the posts. So you can do that through a combination of the post height, or putting another plate here, or washers under the damper plate. But ideally you want to do that by adjusting the post height and getting it in the middle. So I'm going to take this guy, this post's already installed and the height's about correct, and start loading the parts on. So you put your bottom spring on. There's different colors of springs which correspond to different spring stiffnesses. I've kind of settled on using a blue on bottom and green on top. Others may have different preferences. So go ahead and load that spring on. You go ahead and take one plate and slide that on. So as you see, the disc is free floating. And in terms of lubrication, so some people run the dampers dry, which works pretty well. I've kind of settled on using 40 weight silicone oil. Other people use different weights of silicone oil or lighter greases as well, and they all provide different amounts of damping. So I'm going to go ahead and add just a drop of 40 weight oil around the edge. You can see it's just a tiny amount around the edge of the disc. You don't want to get too crazy with this, because if you put down too much, it's going to get everywhere and just make a mess of your car. So put that on, and now put the plate on, and I'll go ahead and add another small amount of silicone oil on top before I put the top disc on. So just about that amount, just a tiny bit. Go ahead and put the top disc on. Go ahead and put the upper spring on. And then go ahead and grab the top screw and the washer. Just go ahead and tighten that down. Okay. And then the next thing you have to do is, assuming your plate's at the correct height, and see this one is about in the center of the post, the discs and the plate. There we go. This one actually takes, I have to put this top shock mounting plate underneath to space the main plate up at the correct height on this chassis. So go ahead and screw this down. And so once again, you do need to make sure your damper plate is screwed down, because if it's floating around and jiggling, I've seen people not tighten the screws on these guys or have it float around, and then your damper plate's basically not doing any damping, the plate's moving around. So, and same with, say, up and down, because there's an up and down component to the damping as well. So you need to put these screws on and make sure they're tight and the plate is basically fixed to the chassis. So I'll go ahead and do that. All right, and so after that is done, and we're snug, that's it. So if you were to feel this rear end, it basically feels like butter. There's glass on glass, there's nothing catching, super smooth damping action. The discs are free and no constraints at all. And then you're done. Now, in terms of maintenance, so if you're using oil or grease or something, you do need to periodically clean that out because it will gather RCP dust and all sorts of debris. I have typically taken this out and re-oiled it like once a full race day. That seems to last, and it looks like the oil's kind of gone. I might add another drop or two, but for the most part, a clean damper should last you, most of a race day, if not more.